Well, it is interesting, and I think the biggest problem we have is in differentiating it, and you did a little bit, but not completely. There's a little bit of sleight of hand between pharma and device, which is a very different level of profit. It's at least an order of magnitude between pharma and device, in part due to the number of per unit sales of drugs versus the number of per unit sales of devices. You sell a lot more. There, it's a lower cost, but much, much higher volume, and you did show it on some of the slides. The device manufacturers still, you were showing a $6.7 billion profit. The problem is it's not itemized, it's not line itemized. And when I said the data are confidential, that's per device. I have yet to be able to disclose what is made on a given device in a company. Overall, globally, their annual report will show sales, and it will show costs, expenses, and ultimately it will show profit, and that's correct. But to know how much an individual device benefits to a company are not data that I was able to readily discover. That's not to say they shouldn't be funding it, because $6.7 billion is still real money unless you're sitting on Capitol Hill and writing out checks. $6.7 billion is nothing to sneer at. So I think the two main things we have to realize are device companies are different than drug companies, and even though they're making $3.6 billion, they're not making $36 billion. And yes, they should absolutely fund it, and the government's not. It's a fairly simple argument. They don't even want to pay for us to take care of our patients for already approved procedures. I don't see that they're suddenly going to change and start paying for investigational procedures as well. But fortunately, they should be reimbursed. They should not be at the burden of the patient, nor should they be at the burden of the institution, that if we want to perform investigational studies, we need to eat that cost too, just like we eat the cost for emergency procedures and reoperations and all the other things that are non-reimbursed that we have to figure out how to absorb, and all the instruments we want to use in our operations for which there are not add-on codes during surgery, and if we elect to use them, we're going to be the ones paying for them, and we shouldn't be the ones as hospitals and as healthcare providers absorbing that cost. It does have to be reimbursed, and I think the most likely reimburser and the fairest reimburser is the one who will profit the most from the ultimate development of the investigation, and that's the manufacturer, not the government.
Dr. Peters, you get the last word.
You see, I've convinced him. He agrees. The device and drug development industry should pay for these investigational procedures and drugs. Now, Steve, the patients don't pay for these. When was the last time you billed a patient for a clinical trial? It doesn't happen. The patients aren't paying for these things. They never have. It'd be ludicrous to ask a patient to sign a consent form and then send them a bill at the same time. Doesn't happen. The burden is currently and has been for the lifetime of most of the people in this room, not on the patients, nor is it on the physicians or the professionals. We don't pay for these procedures either. We don't pay for the drugs. We don't pay for the operating room time by and large. We don't pay for the devices. Maybe we pay a little bit of our time. But in many clinical trials, I can tell you, and those of you who have participated in the room know, you often can extract a professional fee from the device manufacturer or drug developer if you're running a clinical trial. So the patients and the professionals are not paying for these things now. The industry is paying for it as well as half by the NIH. That's exactly where it should be. And Steve sort of skirted over an important point there for a moment that I want to reemphasize, and that is that there's a large proportion of failure. 2 or 3 out of 10 devices and drugs succeed. And there is no way that we can absorb a 70% failure rate into a $100 billion budget and put that on the backs of Medicare or our third-party payers. We won't get paid for the stuff we should get paid for, worse than we do today if we do that. We ought to leave it alone. Don't mess with it.
We have time for a comment or two from the audience. I think actually both of you are kind of arguing together. It's just different parts of the chorus. Where? Oh. Okay, let's see if I can read it. Okay, if investigational procedures are reimbursed by payers, gentlemen, isn't there a danger of too many surgeons jumping on the bandwagon too early? In other words, no one did carotid stenting early because Medicare didn't pay for it, and it turned out to have poor results in the end. Anyone want to comment on that?
Well, I think that danger is really going to be mitigated by the fact that they're not going to pay for it. I mean, it's rather a moot point. There's no danger that the government is suddenly going to start reimbursing investigational procedures. So I think the days when a couple of them may have been are long since past. They're figuring out ways to not pay for things that we do that are routine and accepted and have good results.
In the ideal world, I'd like to think that the ability to get paid and the mechanism to get paid wouldn't necessarily drive the adoption of a procedure. We all know that we don't exactly live in that perfect world, and there are considerable forces, reimbursement forces that drive procedures. I think that's a very real risk, a very insightful question, and probably true.
What about something that is slightly different than the established technology that's currently in place?
Investigational procedures should be reimbursed by 1 industry, 2 government payers, 3 private payers, 4 any or all of the above, and 5 none of the above. You have 10 seconds, and the bars under each of these will show you how the responses have changed, if they have changed, since the question was initially posed. Okay, so industry, there's overwhelming change in the opinion that industry should reimburse these, and that seems to be consistent with what both of the speakers put forward, so you're both winners here today. It's like non-competitive soccer.
And now we're at the final debate, which we have enthusiastically called the title bout. The question is about the universality of laparoscopy. And so we need the first question up for this. So the question is, surgical organizations have an ethical responsibility to make minimal access surgery available to all patients. Number 1 is yes, number 2 is no. Your votes, please. All right, so